Have you ever wondered why a single wolf howl could make an entire medieval village hold its breath? In the Middle Ages, wolves were not just wild animals, they were hunger, darkness, lost sheep, dangerous roads, and every fear waiting beyond the last candle-lit window. Tonight, we step into a cold medieval world of muddy paths, locked gates, winter fields, and whispered legends. So get comfortable, and if you enjoy slow, atmospheric history for sleep, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the outer wall of a medieval town just as dusk lowers itself over the fields like a damp wool blanket. Cold stone presses at your back, damp straw clings to the hem of your cloak, smoke hangs in the rafters of the gate passage, and somewhere beyond the misted river a bell tolls with the slow patience of someone who has never had to hurry through mud. Your boots are heavy, your fingers are stiff, and the breath of tired horses clouds the winter air beside you. A torch gutters in an iron bracket, throwing gold over puddles, cart ruts, and the suspicious face of a gatekeeper who looks as if joy has been taxed at the town gate. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You probably would not last a week out here, not with the cold, the fleas, the bad roads, and the unsettling habit everyone has of whispering about wolves after sunset. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, softly, as you settle in, comment where you're listening from and what the local time is beside your own window. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The town gate stands half open before you, its oak doors swollen from rain and bound with black iron straps as broad as a smith's palm. You pass under the arch with a small line of others, a woman with a covered basket of eggs held close beneath her cloak, a peddler carrying tin spoons that click together at every step, two monks in dark wool with their sleeves tucked against the cold, and a carter whose mule has decided, with the dignity of a bishop, that it has finished moving for the evening. No one raises their voice. The hour itself seems to ask for quiet. Even the muddy wheels turn with a soft, tired, sucking sound, and the last light of day gathers in the puddles like dull pewter. Inside the wall, the street narrows at once. Timber houses lean over you from both sides, their upper floors jutting forward as if listening to your thoughts. Rushes lie scattered over patches of stone and packed earth near doorways, sweet herbs mixed among them where a household has been tidy, sour old straw where it has not. A woman shakes crumbs from a trencher into the gutter, and a thin cat slips from shadow to shadow with the boldness of a creature that pays no rent. From a nearby bakehouse comes the warm, yeasty smell of coarse bread, nearly enough to make you forget your wet feet, though not quite. Wet feet are stubborn historians. They remember everything. The bell from the church tower sounds again, slower now, marking the edge between labour and night. You feel how much the town trusts that bell. It tells apprentices when to stop hammering, wives when to pull pottage from the fire, children when to come in from the yard, and travellers like you that the gate will soon be barred. Beyond that gate lie the open fields, the river path, the hedgerows, and farther still the dark seam of forest that has been waiting all day for its colour to return. In the last wash of dusk it looks less like trees than a great animal lying low along the horizon. Near the gatehouse, men gather round a brazier, warming their hands above coals that glow under a crust of ash. Their cloaks are patched, their caps pulled low, their faces red from wind. One wears a leather apron stiff with old grease, perhaps a butcher or tanner. Another has the narrow, watchful look of a shepherd, the sort of man who counts living things even in his sleep. You drift close enough to feel the heat on your palms, and close enough to hear the word that passes between them in a hush. Wolves! It is spoken not loudly, not as a shout or a tale meant to impress, but as people speak of unpaid rent, fever, spoiled grain, and other things that arrive whether invited or not. The shepherd scratches at his beard and says that something has been moving along the far pasture near St. Osyth's meadow. He found prints in the thawing mud, large and clean, with claw marks sharp ahead of them. A dog would wander, a fox would weave. This thing, he says, moved straight as a lord going to judgment. No one can quite agree whether it was one wolf or three. The butcher swears he heard two voices in the howling, one high and one deep. The gatekeeper says sound bends strangely over frozen ground, and that fear adds extra wolves to every noise. A monk, pale under his hood, murmurs that in some places bells are rung not only for prayer, but to keep beasts from coming near the dead. Someone else makes the sign of the cross with 2 fingers and mutters that wolves know when a household has failed to say its evening prayers. It is a small, uneasy superstition, but no one laughs. Not really. You stand there with the brazier smoke in your nose and begin to understand that wolves are not merely animals here. They are hunger given paws. They are winter with teeth. They are the thing that waits beyond the last hedge, beyond the last candle, beyond the last neighbour close enough to hear you call. In a world where most people walk, where roads cross empty ground, where a broken cartwheel can turn an ordinary errand into a night under dripping branches, the wolf is not a distant symbol. It is part of the weather of fear. The gatekeeper takes an iron key from his belt, heavy enough to bruise a careless thigh, and tests it in his palm. He says the western postern will stay bolted tonight. Too many folk have been coming late from the outlying farms, and too many bring stories with them. A boy from the mill saw eyes beyond the willow bank. A charcoal burner found his tether rope chewed through. A widow heard scratching near the byre and threw a burning brand into the dark. Though some swear it was only her own goat making a nuisance of itself. Goats, in fairness, have been preparing for that accusation since creation. You move on slowly, deeper into the town, but the talk follows you like smoke caught in wool. At an open doorway, a girl sprinkles salt across the threshold, not wasting much, for salt costs money, but enough to show caution. Her grandmother tells her to place a bit of iron beneath the cradle as well, because iron troubles wicked things. Whether it troubles wolves is another matter, though those who tell such customs rarely worry over neat categories. In this age, a charm may guard against beasts, spirits, envy, fever, and bad luck all at once, provided it is old enough and spoken with confidence. The street bends toward the market square, where stalls are closing beneath strips of canvas darkened by mist. A fishmonger packs smoked fish into a barrel, each silver-grey body stiff and salted for keeping. A woman ladles pottage into wooden bowls from a pot near the wall, and the smell of peas, onions, and barley rolls out in a humble cloud. You buy a small bowl with a clipped coin, and eat standing under the eaves, feeling the warmth move down into you. The spoon is rough. The bowl has a crack near the rim. The pottage is plain, smoky, and blessedly hot, which is more than enough philosophy for one evening. Above the square, the church windows hold the last dim shine of the sky. A few beeswax candles burn near a side altar, their flames small and steady behind cloudy horn panes. A painted saint looks down with calm eyes, one hand raised, the other holding something that might be a book, or a box, or perhaps the artist changed his mind halfway through and hoped no one would mention it. Beside the church porch, Pilgrims have left little tokens, a bent pin, a shell badge dulled by weather, a scrap of ribbon tied near the carved foot of a saint. Some swear St. Edmund once drove wolves from a village after a child was found safe in a thorn hedge. Others say it was St. Hubert, or St. Blay, or no saint at all, only dogs and good luck. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but they agree on the important part: the wolves had been near, and the people had been afraid. As darkness thickens, shutters close one by one. You hear wooden bars drop inside houses. You hear a mother calling a child away from the lane. You hear the soft thud of an oak door being shut with both hands. The town does not panic. It folds itself inward, practiced and patient. This is how fear lives here, not always as a scream, not always as a chase through trees, but as a habit, a checked latch, a hurried step at dusk, a prayer under the breath. A shepherd counting again, though he has already counted twice. You find lodging near the inn yard, where wet straw steams faintly under tired horses, and a lantern swings from a beam. The innkeeper's wife gives you a place near the hearth for a small fee and a suspicious glance at your boots. Inside, rushes cover the floor, and smoke stains the rafters black as old bread crust. Men sit close to the fire with cups of weak ale, their faces turned orange by flame. Someone mentions the forest road. Someone else says not to take it before dawn. Then the room quiets, not completely, but enough for you to hear the town bell one last time through the walls, and beyond it, far away, or perhaps only imagined, a thin sound rising where the fields meet the dark. Inside the alehouse, the room seems to breathe with smoke, warmth, wet wool, and the slow murmur of people who have earned the right to sit down. You settle near the hearth where the stones are cracked from years of fire, and where a blackened iron hook holds a small pot of something that might be stew, or might simply be yesterday's pottage learning new responsibilities. The rushes on the floor are fresh enough near the door, but nearer the benches they have gathered the honest perfume of ale spills, boot mud, onion skins, and every traveller who has ever claimed he was only stopping for one cup. You cup your hands around a wooden bowl of weak ale. Warm from being kept too close to the fire, it tastes sour, smoky, and faintly of the barrel, but the heat of it moves into your fingers, and that matters more than flavour. Beside you, a carter eases his boots from a patch of straw, and shows a blister on his heel to anyone unfortunate enough to look down. Across the hearth, two shepherds sit with their cloaks still fastened, as if they do not quite trust the walls to keep out the night. One has a strip of blue wool tied around his wrist, a small charm against cramp, ill luck, and, according to his grandmother, being noticed by the wrong thing after sunset. No one can quite agree whether such charms work, but many agree it is foolish not to wear one, which is the sort of reasoning that keeps half the medieval world supplied with ribbons. The talk turns, as you know it must, back toward wolves. Not quickly, not with dramatic leaning over the table. This subject arrives the way cold air slips under a door. First, the shepherd with the blue wool speaks of a ewe lost 3 nights ago, taken from a fold no higher than a man's waist and no farther than a stone's throw from the byre. He had set thorn branches along the gap, as his father did, and hung a strip of old leather there to carry the smell of people. In the morning, the branches were dragged aside, and the snow outside the fold was marked with prints, large ones, clear ones, too many for a fox, too purposeful for a wandering dog. A carter snorts into his ale and says shepherds always blame wolves when a fence is badly mended. The shepherd gives him a long look, not angry, only tired. Then he reaches into his pouch and lays something on the table, a clump of wool, grey-white, stiffened with frozen mud. The room grows quieter. It is not a terrible thing to look at, not by itself, just wool, just a little ruined fleece. But in that small clump, everyone sees winter stores shrinking, rents coming due, children needing broth. A landlord steward with an ink tally and no patience for excuses. You begin to understand why wolves frighten people here in a way that is deeper than teeth. A wolf in the field is a threat to the sheep, yes, but sheep are warmth, rent, milk, cheese, wool for cloaks, wool for blankets, wool to barter at market. A missing animal is not merely a loss. It is a hole torn in the household's future. In a world where most families measure comfort by how much grain remains in the bin and how much hay survives the frost, a wolf can seem like hunger walking on 4 legs. The innkeeper's wife passes with a trencher of coarse bread and a little dish of salt. She pauses to listen, though she pretends not to, because pretending not to listen is a beloved village art, practiced with great skill. One of the monks from the gate sits near the wall, his hood pushed back, his tonsured head shining faintly in the firelight. He says that in the abbey library there is a bestiary showing the wolf as a creature of cunning, able to steal a man's voice if it sees him first. Some swear that if a wolf's eyes meet yours before you speak, your tongue will freeze in your mouth, and you will stand dumb as a post while the beast considers your ankles. The carter says he has never known his tongue to freeze, and many would welcome the miracle. A few people laugh softly, grateful for the release, but the monk only shrugs. He's not saying he believes it. He's also not saying he does not. In this room, belief is not a door opened or closed. It is a curtain, moved slightly by drafts. Wolves are real enough. Hunger is real enough. So why should a tale not cling to them, like burrs on a cloak? Another man, a charcoal burner by the soot, works deep into his knuckles, tells of sleeping near his kiln in the woods and waking to silence. Not quiet, he says, but silence, the kind in which even the branches seem to hold still. His old dog had crawled under the cart instead of barking. At dawn, he found paw prints along the edge of the clearing, circling once, then leaving. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the wolf had been curious, hungry, or merely passing through with the calm arrogance of an animal that does not understand property lines. The dog under the nearest bench stirs at this, lifting its head. It is a rough-coated village dog, brown and white, with one torn ear and the expression of someone who has heard every human story and found most of them poorly organized. You noticed it earlier near the inn yard, nosing at straw. Now it watches the door, not frightened exactly, attentive. Its nose twitches whenever the latch rattles in the wind. The shepherd sees you looking and says dogs know. They smell what men miss. Wolves, sickness, strangers, storms. His mother used to say a dog that sleeps with its paws over its nose dreams of snow, and a dog that stares into an empty corner sees what the household has forgotten to bless. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on whether dogs warn of beasts or spirits, but no one in the alehouse mocks the animal. The dog is warm, present, and breathing. In winter. That alone gives it authority. Outside, rain begins to tap at the shutters. The fire settles lower, and a boy brings in more wood, stacking split logs beside the hearth with careful pride. He has ash on his cheek and a strip of bread hidden badly in his sleeve. The innkeeper catches sight of it and says nothing, which may be kindness, weariness, or simple respect for the ancient custom of boys stealing bread badly. You eat from a wooden platter a heel of bread, a spoonful of beans, a piece of smoked fish strong enough to wake a saint. Around you, the room softens into Leia's firelight, low voices, the damp shine of cloaks, the steady drip from someone's hood onto the rushes. Yet the stories keep circling the same dark centre, missing sheep, paw prints near the road, howling heard beyond the millstream, a child hurried indoors before dusk, a traveller advised to wait until morning. You feel the town folding tighter around itself, while beyond the gate the fields lie open, hedges black with rain, the roads slick and pale under clouds. The wolf may be nowhere near. It may be miles away, trotting under bare branches with its ribs sharp from winter. It may be only a rumour wearing footprints. But here, in the smoky warmth, you understand why no one needs to see it clearly for fear to sit beside them at the table. The half-burned candle near the innkeeper's shelf gutters once, recovers, and throws a small gold tremble across the wall. The dog lowers its head again, though its eyes remain open. Somewhere behind the alehouse, a stable horse stamps in wet straw. You draw your cloak closer, listen to the rain, and let the murmured word pass through the room once more. Quieter now, almost swallowed by the fire. Wolves! By morning the rain has thinned into a pale mist that clings to the town walls and turns every roof beam, cart shaft, and hanging sign the colour of old bone. You wake on the alehouse floor with your cloak pulled over your shoulders, the rushes crackling faintly beneath you whenever you shift. The half-burned candle on the innkeeper's shelf has died at last, leaving a small black curl of wick in a puddle of wax, and the hearth is little more than a red eye under ash. Someone snores behind a bench. Someone else mutters in sleep as if bargaining with a tax collector in a dream, which is perhaps the most medieval nightmare available. The church bell sounds before dawn, muffled by mist. It does not ring brightly, it seems to roll through the cold air and settle into your ribs. Around you, people begin to stir with the weary obedience of those who know morning is not an invitation but a command. A maid sweeps the dirtiest rushes toward the door with a twig broom. The innkeeper's wife lifts the lid from last night's pot, sniffs it with grave suspicion, and decides it can still become breakfast if enough onions are added. Outside, hooves shift in wet straw, and the village dog with the torn ear waits by the threshold, watching you as if it has been appointed to supervise your poor decisions. You step into the yard with a heel of coarse bread tucked in your hand and find the shepherd from last night speaking with two men near the stable gate. One carries a forked staff, the other has a coil of rope over his shoulder and a face shut tight against bad news. They're going out to the western pasture, where another animal has gone missing or been found in such a way that no one wants to say the plain words over breakfast. The shepherd sees you looking and nods, not warmly, but not refusing you either. In a place like this, curiosity is tolerated if it has legs and can keep up. So you go. The town gate opens reluctantly. Its iron hinges groan, and the gatekeeper, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak that has seen better animals, lifts his lantern and squints into the grey morning. He warns the shepherd not to linger near the old hedge, where the ground drops toward the alder ditch. Some swear wolves favour ditches because scent lies low there, while others say that is nonsense and wolves favour whatever path brings them breakfast. No one can quite agree whether old rules about animals are wisdom or merely fear repeated by grandfathers until it grows a beard. You pass beneath the arch and out into the fields. At once, the town feels smaller behind you. Its walls, so firm by torchlight, shrink into a damp shape in the mist. Ahead, strips of ploughed land lie dark and heavy, divided by low hedges, wattled fences, and ditches shining with thin ice. You trudge along a path pressed by generations of boots, hooves, and cartwheels, your own feet sinking into mud that grips as if it has legal claim to your shoes. A broken cartwheel leans near the roadside, half buried in grass. One spoke snapped clean through. Someone has tied a scrap of red cloth to it, perhaps to warn travellers, perhaps as a charm against further misfortune. In this world, repair and superstition often share the same knot. The shepherd walks ahead with quick, economical steps. He knows each gate, each shallow rise, each place where water gathers under grass. He points out the manor fields to your left, the Lord's domain land, where villains owe labour days with plough and sickle. A boy with a wooden yoke passes carrying 2 empty buckets, heading toward the stream before the household wakes fully. Farther off, a woman scatters feed for hens near a byre, clucking under her breath as if scolding them into prosperity. The ordinary labour of mourning continues because fear does not milk cows, grind grain, or mend fences. People must do these things themselves, even when wolves are in the stories. At the pasture gate, the air changes or it becomes still. The flock is gathered near the far side, restless grey shapes huddled against the hedge. Their breath smokes in small clouds. The shepherd pauses before entering, then bends to touch the gatepost where a small bundle hangs from a peg. Rowan twigs bound with thread, a bit of sheep's wool, and a bent iron nail. He says his wife tied it there after the first loss. Rowan is thought by some to turn aside evil, iron to trouble wandering spirits, and wool to remind the saints what needs guarding. Even now it is hard to tell whether the charm is meant for wolves, demons, hunger, bad luck, or the manor steward's accounts, which may be the sharpest teeth of all. Inside the field, the ground is frost-stiff in patches and muddied in others. The shepherd crouches, and you crouch beside him. There, pressed into the softened earth near the hedge, are prints, not many, enough. Each one holds a little water in its hollow. The toes are long, the claws marked ahead, the stride measured and straight. The man with the rope says nothing. He only looks toward the ditch. Beyond the hedge, caught on blackthorn, hangs a tuft of wool. More lies scattered in the grass, pale against the mud. It is not dramatic in the way a tale might make it. It is quiet. That is what unsettles you most. No thunder, no monster in the open, no heroic struggle fit for tapestry. Just torn wool, trampled frost, and the dim knowledge that something came in the night while the town slept, passed through the thorn, took what it wanted, and left before the bell. The shepherd's jaw works once. He counts the sheep again, though everyone knows the number already. Counting is a kind of prayer when numbers have gone wrong. 1 ewe gone, 1 lamb injured and trembling near its mother. The man with the forked staff says they must mend the hedge higher before nightfall. The man with the rope says they should ask the manor for timber. At that, the shepherd gives a short laugh without humour. Timber belongs to the Lord. Thorn belongs to whoever bleeds gathering it. Soon others arrive, 2 women with baskets, an older boy carrying a mallet, a Reeves assistant with a wax tablet tucked under his cloak. The assistant writes marks with a little stylus, because loss becomes official only when scratched into wax. He asks whose animal it was, whether the fold was properly closed, whether the shepherd kept watch. His tone is not cruel. It is worse practical. Rents will come due. Wool must be delivered. A missing sheep is sorrow, but also arithmetic. The village dog slips through the gate and noses the prints, then lifts its head toward the ditch. Its torn ear twitches. The shepherd watches it closely. Some swear that if a dog refuses to cross a track, the wolf that made it is no ordinary beast but one touched by curse or old sin. The dog, after a thoughtful pause, steps directly into the mud and sniffs a frozen clump of grass with professional interest. This seems to weaken the curse theory, though no one announces the conclusion. Together, the villagers begin to work. They drag thorn branches from a pile near the hedge, wearing thick mitts or wrapping their hands in scraps of cloth. The boy hammers stakes into the ground. One woman ties bits of rag to the upper branches so that movement in the wind may trouble bold animals. Another murmurs a charm under her breath, 3 times, too softly for you to catch. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such charms are Christian prayers, old country words, or a mixture that would make a priest sigh heavily into his sleeve. You help lift a branch and feel thorns catch at your cloak. The cold enters your fingers, mud cakes your boots, the mist beads on everyone's hair and lashes. Yet slowly the hedge rises, ugly and useful. The flock presses together, the dog keeps watch, far away. The town bell rings again, faint as memory, and in the silence after it, everyone looks once toward the forest line. The forest line waits beyond the pasture as if it has been listening to every word. It is not far, not truly, only a dark band of bare branches and tangled underwood beyond the alder ditch. Yet in the grey morning it feels like the edge of a different country. The villagers look that way for a breath, then lower their eyes and return to the hedge, because staring at fear does not mend fences. Thorn must be lifted, stakes must be driven, sheep must be counted again, and then again. Because a shepherd's heart does not trust arithmetic after wolves have visited. You leave them near the pasture when the work settles into rhythm. The shepherd thanks you with a nod and presses into your hand a strip of hard cheese wrapped in cloth, the sort of gift that says little aloud but means more than a polite blessing. The village dog with the torn ear follows you to the gate, stops, considers the mud, considers you, and then comes along as if this journey has been poorly managed and now requires canine oversight. The road toward the monastery climbs gently from the fields. It begins as a cart track between hedges, slick with thaw and printed by hooves, clogs, and the narrow wheels of wagons. You pass the broken cartwheel again, the red cloth on its spoke hanging limp in the damp air, and it seems already to belong to the morning story, a small landmark of inconvenience and warning. Beyond it, the land opens into strips of winter stubble, where crows walk like little black monks, pecking at whatever the frost has spared. The bell rings again from somewhere ahead. At first you feel it more than hear it, a low trembling over the fields, carried through mist and bare branches. Then another note follows, and another, slow and round. The monastery lies beyond a shallow rise, hidden by trees and folded ground, but its bells travel where walls cannot. They move over ditches, sheepfolds, muddy lanes, and lonely farms. They tell the hour for people who own no clock. They call monks to prayer, labourers to pause, kitchens to prepare, and anxious minds to remember that somewhere, at least, order is being kept. The man walking ahead of you is a miller's cousin, or so he told you at the pasture, though in medieval villages kinship spreads so widely that nearly everyone is someone's cousin if the conversation lasts long enough. He carries a sack of grain for the abbey bakehouse and walks with the steady lean of someone used to burdens. He says the bells keep wolves away from the monastery woods. Some swear the sound troubles their ears. Others say wolves hate holy places, especially where relics are kept and psalms are sung through the night. No one can quite agree whether it is holiness or noise that does the work. and the miller's cousin admits that if he were a wolf, he might avoid monks simply because monks rise far too early. You follow him up the road, smiling a little into your cloak. The way narrows near a stand of hazel and ash. Here the hedges grow wild, their lower branches matted with dead leaves, their roots gripping the bank above a ditch full of brown water. The dog ranges ahead, nose low, then returns to your side whenever the branches crowd too close. You notice small signs hung from twigs along the way, a scrap of linen, a bent horseshoe nailed to a post, a little cross carved into bark. Travellers leave such things when roads feel uncertain. Some are prayers, some are warnings, some may be nothing more than someone marking a path in weather when all hedges look equally miserable, which is a humble but valuable kind of magic. A woman comes from the opposite direction with 2 geese bound in a wicker basket, their heads poking out with offended dignity. She wears a russet cloak and a linen coif tied tight beneath her chin. When the bells sound again, she pauses and crosses herself, touching brow, breast, shoulder, shoulder. The geese hiss at the dog. The dog pretends not to care, with limited success. She tells the miller's cousin that wolves were heard last week near the old charcoal pits, and that Brother Anselm ordered the small bell rung after Compline for 3 nights. Some swear the howling stopped after that. Others say the wolves had already moved north, following deer. Even now, it is hard to tell whether a bell drives off danger or merely comforts those waiting in the dark. The road dips under trees. The air grows colder. You smell wet bark, leaf mould, and the faint sourness of standing water. The bells continue, but under the branches they sound changed, broken into softer pieces by trunks and mist. You begin to understand why people cling to them. Out here, between settlement and abbey, a bell is a thread thrown across emptiness. It says there are hands pulling ropes, feet on stone floors, candles burning, bread rising, someone awake and measuring the day. Against wolves, perhaps that matters. Against loneliness, surely it does. The miller's cousin tells you that the monastery keeps its own flock behind a wall of stone and thorn. The lay brothers rise before dawn to check the folds, carrying horn lanterns and cudgels. In the coldest months, they smear the gate-post with pitch and hang old bits of metal, their broken knife blades, rusted buckles, cracked horseshoes, because iron is believed to worry evil things. Whether wolves notice iron is uncertain, but the brothers notice if the iron is missing. And that may be half the point. A watched gate is a stronger gate. You pass a field where 2 lay workers are cutting brush, their hands wrapped in cloth against thorns. One wears a patched hood the colour of faded saffron, bright against the grey morning. They stack branches on a sled to drag toward the abbey's outer fence, nearby. A boy scatters ashes along a slippery patch of path so the brothers will not fall when carrying water. He does it with solemn concentration, as if saving Christendom one icy puddle at a time. Medieval heroism often wears muddy shoes. The bells cease suddenly. The silence after them is so wide that you hear water dripping from branches, the creak of the grain sack on the miller's cousin's shoulder, and the soft huff of the dog's breath. Everyone seems to listen without meaning to. The woman with the geese looks back once down the road. The lay workers pause with their bundles. Nothing comes. No howl. No crack of brush. Only the winter morning gathering itself again. Then, from beyond the rise, a smaller bell rings clearer, sharper, nearer. It is answered by a wooden clapper, dull and practical, perhaps calling someone to the bakehouse or dairy. Life resumes. The woman shifts her basket. The lay workers return to their brush. The dog sneezes, which ruins the solemnity but improves the mood. At last the monastery appears. Its outer wall rises from the mist in pale stone, patched with moss and damp stains, not grand like a king's fortress, but steady, enclosed, deliberate. A gatehouse stands beneath a slate roof, and above it hangs a small bell in a wooden frame. Beyond the wall you glimpse roofs, a squat tower, smoke lifting from a kitchen chimney, and the dark comb of orchard trees. The place smells of wet stone, baking bread, beeswax, and animals kept close for winter. A lay brother opens the gate when the miller's cousin knocks. He is broad, red-handed, and wrapped in a wool cloak dusted with flour. He takes the grain, looks at you, looks at the dog, and raises one eyebrow as if travellers arriving with dogs are common but seldom well explained. Behind him, from somewhere within the abbey court, the great bell begins again, deep and slow, rolling over stone, straw, wood smoke, and your cold hands. You step through the gate while the sound passes around you, and for a moment the forest feels farther away. Within the monastery gate the world gathers itself into quieter shapes. The great bell still trembles in the stone under your boots, though its voice fades overhead into a damp grey sky. You stand in the outer court while the lay brother carries the sack of grain toward the bakehouse, where warm air leaks from a low doorway and brings with it the smell of yeast, rye flour, and wood smoke. A few hens scratch near a dung heap with the confidence of abbots. Beyond them, a novice hurries across the yard carrying 2 wooden buckets of water, slopping half of one onto his own shoes and accepting this injustice with the hollow-eyed patience of the very young. The dog with the torn ear follows you inside, then stops near the gate as if surprised to find that holiness smells mostly of wet wool, flour, and livestock. A monk at the porter's bench glances down at it, then at you, then back at the dog. He says nothing. In monasteries, silence can be discipline, suspicion, or simply a man saving his breath for later complaints. You're led along a covered walk where rainwater drips from the eaves in silver threads. The stones beneath your feet are worn smooth by generations of sandals. To one side lies the cloister garth, a square of winter grass with a leafless apple tree standing in the middle like a patient old scribe who has forgotten where he put his ink. The branches tremble in the wind. Somewhere nearby, a wooden door opens and closes. Somewhere farther off, a brother coughs through the end of a psalm. The guest master, a narrow man with kind eyes and fingers stained faintly yellow from old parchment, brings you toward the warming room first. There, a small fire burns in a brazier, and several monks hold their hands near it before returning to their tasks. The rule says warmth is not to be loved too much, but the monks appear willing to admire it respectfully from a very close distance. Your cloak steams faintly. Your fingers ache as feeling returns. A cup of thin ale is placed in your hands, and with it a heel of bread and a small piece of cheese sharper than expected, as if it has strong opinions about Lent. After you eat, the guestmaster asks whether you can keep quiet. You nod, which is a safe answer in a monastery. He takes you then to the scriptorium. The room is long, narrow, and cold despite its high windows. Light falls through horn panes in pale squares, enough for work but not enough for comfort. Along the walls sit desks angled toward the day, each one holding knives, quills, pumice, ink horns, scraps of parchment, and small weights to keep curling pages flat. Beeswax candles burn where the light is poor, their flames steady behind little shields of polished metal. The air smells of vellum, ink, dust, cold stone, and the faint animal memory of scraped hides, It is not unpleasant. It is simply old, patient, and serious. At one desk, a monk bends over a manuscript with his hood pushed back. His fingertips are black with ink, and there is a smudge across his cheek where he has touched his face without thinking. He draws a fine brown line around a painted beast in the margin. The beast has pointed ears, a long muzzle, and eyes picked out in dark dots. Its back is arched, its paws too neat, its teeth carefully suggested rather than shown. It is meant to be a wolf, though it looks a little like a fox that has joined a monastery and taken up bad habits. You stand beside the desk, careful not to breathe too directly on anything expensive. Parchment is dear, ink is dear, time is dear. A careless sleeve could ruin a week of labour, and no one wants to become a moral example in the refectory. The monk notices your gaze and taps the page lightly with the back of his knife. He says the book is a bestiary, copied for a prior in another house, and that the wolf is among the more troublesome animals to paint because everyone thinks they know what a wolf looks like, while very few agree once the drawing is made. Some swear wolves are grey as ash, others dark as wet bark, others pale in winter like dirty snow. No one can quite agree whether the wolf in the old text is beast, warning, symbol, punishment, or merely a hungry creature unfairly burdened with sermons. He shows you the written lines beside the image. You cannot read all of them, but he tells you the sense. Wolves are said to creep softly, to hunt in hunger, to seize the careless, to strike where watchfulness fails. Some old authorities claim that if a wolf sees a man before the man sees the wolf, the man loses his voice. The guest master, standing behind you, says this is likely a teaching about fear. The younger monk says he has known brothers to lose their voices when called on to chant the wrong psalm, so perhaps wolves are not required. The joke is small enough to survive the room. In the margin below the wolf, the monk has painted a shepherd with a crook, a tiny fold of sheep, and a bell hanging from a bent tree. The bell shines with shell gold, no larger than your thumbnail. The sheep are white dots with legs. The shepherd's cloak is coloured russet, and his face has one worried eyebrow. Around the scene, gilded leaves curl like frost. You think of the man in the pasture counting his flock, of the thorn hedge rising under cold hands, of the clump of wool on the alehouse table. Here, reduced to ink and colour, the fear looks delicate, almost pretty. That makes it stranger. Another scribe at the far desk sharpens a quill with a small knife, shaving the feather with precise little cuts. He mutters that wolves take not only sheep but sleep. In villages near the North Wood, he says, people sometimes leave bread crusts at the edge of the fields. Not as an offering exactly, for a priest might object to that word, but as a way of saying, take this and go no farther. Some swear it keeps wolves from the fold. Others say it teaches foxes poor manners, even now. It is hard to tell whether such customs begin as hope, bargaining, or the ordinary human wish to do something when doing nothing feels unbearable. A novice enters with a tray of fresh ink and nearly trips on the threshold. 3 monks look up at once, and the tray steadies by some miracle of terror. He places the ink down with both hands and withdraws backward, red to the ears. On one desk, a page is being scraped clean with a knife where a mistake has been made. The sound is soft and dry, like a mouse behind a wall. The guestmaster tells you that parchment may be reused if handled carefully. Though old words sometimes remain faintly beneath the new, fear is like that too, he says, and then seems embarrassed to have spoken so poetically before supper. The wind scratches at the shutters. For a moment, all the little noises become clear quills whispering, wax breathing around flame, a monk's sleeve brushing wood, rain ticking against the horn panes. The dog outside barks once in the court, not wildly, only once, as if making a formal announcement. Every head in the scriptorium lifts. The wolf in the painted margin seems to wait with them, black-eyed and still. Nothing follows, only the bell from the cloister passage, smaller now, calling the next office. The monks lower their heads again. Quills return to their slow paths. Ink darkens letters that may outlive the hands forming them. You stand in the cold room, wrapped in borrowed quiet, and understand that wolves enter more than folds and forests. They enter books, sermons, charms, bells, jokes, market talk, and the worried sleep of people who bar their doors before nightfall. The fear is copied carefully, decorated with gold, and passed onward, so that even a painted wolf in a margin can make a room listen when the wind touches the shutters. The bell that calls the office fades through the scriptorium walls, and by the time evening lowers over the monastery, the painted wolf in the margin has settled into your thoughts like a small dark thorn. You eat in the guest hall that night with other travellers, sitting on a bench polished by years of uneasy strangers. The meal is simple, coarse bread, a bowl of bean pottage, a little smoked fish, and ale so mild it seems to apologise for itself. A rushlight burns near the doorway, its flame bending whenever someone enters from the court, and the smell of wet wool follows every cloak like a loyal servant. The dog with the torn ear is not allowed inside at first, but after it sits beneath the eaves looking dignified, patient, and lightly betrayed, a lay brother relents and leaves it a crust near the threshold. The dog accepts this tribute without surprise. Some creatures are born understanding hospitality. You sleep in the guest house under a wool blanket that scratches your chin and keeps you warm only if you remain completely still, which is difficult when the straw mattress has opinions. Around you, pilgrims breathe and shift in the dark. One man murmurs prayers in his sleep. Another clutches a little badge shaped like a shell, bought on some road far from here, or perhaps traded from someone who liked the look of it. In the rafters, smoke from the hearth has left the beams black and glossy. The great monastery bell wakes you before sunrise, deep and steady, and the room stirs as if the sound has taken hold of every blanket and pulled. You rise in the blue dark cold, your boots are stiff, your cloak is still damp at the hem, the half-burned candle you carried from the alehouse, tucked foolishly in your pouch as if it were a relic of your own bad lodging, has cracked in the chill, but you keep it anyway. Small objects gather meaning on long roads, especially when they have survived smoke, mud, and your own carelessness. In the yard, pilgrims are already assembling near the gate. There are 6 of them, a broad widow in a teal cloak with a basket over one arm, a narrow man with a pilgrim staff polished by much handling, 2 brothers carrying a shared bundle tied in sacking, a young woman with the linen coif pinned carefully beneath her chin, and an older fellow whose hat is so covered in badges that he jingles faintly when he walks. He has shells, little lead saints, a tiny ampulla for holy water, and one badge that may once have been a rooster, but has suffered from weather and theology. They mean to take the eastern road, the one that skirts the wolf-haunted wood before turning toward the river crossing. The porter warns them not to stray from the track. He says this not dramatically, but with the tired tone of a man who has watched travellers ignore sensible advice for years. Some swear that wolves near the wood follow pilgrims because pilgrims carry food in their scrips. Others insist wolves avoid groups, staffs, bells, and singing. No one can quite agree whether singing frightens wolves, comforts people, or merely punishes everyone within hearing. The older pilgrim says he knows 3 hymns and all of them badly. The widow tells him one will be enough. You leave as dawn begins to loosen the dark. The monastery gate closes behind you with a wooden thud, and the sound seems to separate the ordered world of bells and cloisters from the road ahead. Frost silvers the grass. Mist lies low in the hollows. The dog trots near your heel for a while, then moves ahead, nose working over the path. It has apparently joined the pilgrimage without taking vows. The road bends between hedges and then lowers toward the trees. The pilgrims walk slowly at first, warming their legs. Staffs tap the frozen mud. The widow carries little oatcakes wrapped in cloth. The narrow man has dried peas in a pouch. One brother carries a wooden bowl, the other a knife, because between them they have decided that civilization can be divided into eating and cutting. You pass a field where a boy breaks ice from a trough with a mallet, his breath puffing white, while a woman in a doorway shakes ashes from a pan onto a slick patch of yard. Daily life continues everywhere in small acts of survival. The world does not pause for fear, it simply ties its shoes tighter. As the trees draw nearer, the talk becomes softer. The wood is not vast, but it is thick enough to make the road feel borrowed. Bare branches lace overhead. Under them, last year's leaves rot into the smell of damp earth. The older pilgrim touches one of his badges whenever the wind moves through the hazel. The young woman keeps one hand on the little pouch at her belt, where she says she carries rosemary, a pinch of salt, and a scrap of parchment with a prayer written by a clerk who charged too much for very small letters. Some swear rosemary guards against ill air and wandering harm. Others say it mostly improves the smell of a traveller who has not bathed since Martinmas. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the herb protects the body, the spirit, or the patience of companions. Before the road enters the darkest part of the trees, you come upon the shrine. It stands at the fork where an older track vanishes under ashen thorn. The shrine is no more than a small wooden box set on a post beneath a leaning hawthorn, with a painted saint inside, his face faded by rain and smoke from travellers' candles. A little roof of split shingles keeps the worst weather away. Around the post hang ribbons, bent pins, scraps of wool, a child's wooden bead, and 2 old horseshoe nails tied with thread. At the base lie crumbs of bread, a few hazelnuts, and a small clay cup cracked down one side. The place feels humble, almost accidental, and yet every pilgrim stops. The widow lowers her basket and takes out a crumb of oat cake. She places it beside the post. Not quite an offering, not quite not. The older pilgrim pins a bent needle into the bark with a murmured prayer to St. Hubert, who is often called upon by hunters, though another traveller insists this shrine belongs to St. Edmund, and a third says it was once for a local holy woman whose name has worn away like the paint. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the little saint in the box receives them all with the same chipped patience. You watch the narrow man kneel, stiffly, and whisper for safe roads, sound feet, honest ferrymen, and no wolves. His list is practical. Medieval prayer often is. The young woman ties a saffron thread to a twig and touches the mud with 2 fingers before crossing herself. One of the brothers leaves a pea, then thinks better of it and leaves 3. His brother mutters that generosity towards saints should not come from their shared supper. The dog sniffs the crumbs, receives a sharp warning from the widow, and withdraws with a look of deep spiritual disappointment. You add nothing at first. Then you take the cracked bit of candle from your pouch, the half-burned remnant from the alehouse shelf, smoke-stained and unimpressive, and set it near the clay cup. It is not fine beeswax, not a church candle, not anything a monk would praise, but it has travelled with you from the first night of wolf talk, through mud, Pasture, bells, and ink. It belongs here well enough. For a while, no one moves. The mist thickens between the trunks. Somewhere far off, a branch cracks under its own frost, and every head turns. The dog lifts its nose. Nothing appears, only the wood breathing cold around the road. Then the widow gathers her basket, the pilgrims take up their staffs, and you continue together beneath the trees. Behind you, the little shrine fades into dawn mist, its ribbons stirring softly, its crumbs waiting for birds, foxes, saints, or whatever hungry thing arrives first. The road under the trees does not hurry. It curves where old roots have lifted the earth, dips where winter water has softened the track, and rises again beneath ash branches that meet overhead like thin fingers. You walk with the pilgrims in a loose line, listening to staffs tap mud, baskets creak, and the dog move ahead through dead leaves with quiet purpose. Dawn has fully arrived, but in the wood the light remains uncertain, filtered through mist and branch and the grey breath of the season. No one sings. The older pilgrim with the jingling badges had promised a hymn, but the forest seems to have improved his judgment. Even his little lead saints are quieter now, bumping softly against one another on his hat brim. The widow in the teal cloak walks near you, steady and broad-footed, and she tells you that the eastern road is never pleasant in winter. In spring it floods. In summer it breeds flies. In autumn carts sink to their axles. Winter, she says, at least has the courtesy to be honest about making you miserable. Medieval road planning, you begin to suspect, consists mostly of finding the least spiteful mud. After an hour, the trees thin beside a charcoal clearing. The ground is blackened in patches, and a round earthen kiln smokes faintly under a covering of turf, breathing like some buried creature too tired to wake. Beside it stands a low shelter made from poles and old sacking, with a hide stretched over the windward side. A man emerges from it wearing a fur-lined cloak, leather boots bound with strips of cloth, and a cap pulled low over his ears. His beard is rimed with grey frost. At his belt hang a knife, a pouch, and a string of small bones or toggles that click when he moves. He is the hunter the pilgrims were told might be watching this stretch of road, though he looks more like the forest has slowly invented a man out of smoke, bark, and old leather. He lifts one hand in greeting and studies the dog first, then the people. "Road's clear behind me," he says. "Clear enough. At least." This is not the most comforting phrase, but among people who live outdoors, certainty is rationed like salt. The widow asks about wolves. The hunter turns his head slightly toward the deeper wood. His face does not change. He says there are wolves north of the alder marsh, lean ones, moving wide because the deer have gone high and the snow crust breaks badly under hooves. They come near farms when hunger draws them, not wickedness. A wolf is not the devil's cousin, he says, no matter what old women and frightened boys claim. It follows meat, it follows weakness, it follows scent. Some swear wolves choose the sinful house first, the one where prayers are neglected or bread is wasted. The hunter spits into the ash and says wolves choose the easiest fence. No one can quite agree whether this is wisdom, irreverence, or simply a man who has spent too long in weather to flatter anyone's fear. He invites the group nearer his fire, which is small but fiercely alive beneath a roof of bent branches. You crouch close, grateful as heat climbs into your knees. The dog settles just outside the smoke, eyes half closed, torn ear angled toward the trees. The hunter has a strip of dried meat hung from a peg, a wooden bowl, a roll of cord, and several snares laid neatly on a piece of hide. He does not display trophies like a boastful hall hunter. His tools a plain ash spear, bow unstrung against damp, iron knife kept oiled, a horn lantern patched with scraped hide. He shows the pilgrims how to read the ground near the clearing. Here, dear prince, delicate and split. There, boar rooting under leaves, a fox track crossing sideways, clever and light. Farther on, near a damp patch. He points to marks almost vanished by thaw. Wolf, he says, 2 nights old, not running, not hunting hard, passing. You look at the print and find it less monstrous than expected. A hollow in mud, 4 toes, claw points, the same kind of mark you saw near the manor pasture. Yet here, in the hunter's voice, it becomes not a curse but information. That does not make it less frightening. It only makes fear stand on firmer feet. The older pilgrim asks whether wolves attack travellers. The hunter's answer comes slowly. Rarely, he says. If people walk together, if they keep to the road, if they are not wounded, sleeping, drunk, lost, or carrying meat in a foolish way. He glances at one brother's bundle, and the brother immediately shifts it behind his back, as if salted pork can be made invisible through moral effort. In hard winters, the hunter continues, all rules grow thin. Hunger teaches boldness. A starving animal is a poor scholar of boundaries. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how bad the winter was 20 years ago, but the hunter remembers enough. He was young then, sleeping in his father's hut near the upper coppice, when the snow lay crusted over the fields and every ditch vanished under white. People kept animals inside if they could, even chickens beneath baskets in the house, where the smell made prayer more urgent. A widow lost 2 goats. A Reeves boy came upon a wolf at the midden, both of them surprised, both of them retreating with great dignity. At night, the howl sounded close, then far, then close again, as sound travelled strangely over frozen ground. Fear multiplied them. 1 wolf became 5, 5 became 20. By Candlemas, every shadow had fur. The young woman with rosemary in her pouch asks whether the old charms help. The hunter smiles, not unkindly. He says a thorn fence helps, a shut gate helps, dogs help, fires help, companions help. Bells may help if they keep people awake and working. As for charms, he has seen men with relics make foolish choices and men with no relics survive by keeping dry tinder. Even now, it is hard to tell whether a charm turns danger aside or merely reminds the hand to bar the door. He reaches into a pouch and takes out a small object, a carved piece of antler, pierced and darkened by handling. His mother made him carry it after his first winter hunt. It is marked with a cross on one side and a crooked line on the other, which he says might be a wolf track, a river, or his mother's poor knife work. He carries it still. The older pilgrim gives him a look that says the argument has defeated itself, very gently. The hunter laughs under his breath. A man may know better, he says, and still keep his mother's charm. You sit there while smoke drifts low, and the pilgrim share bread, oat cakes, and a little cheese. The hunter offers hot water steeped with thyme, bitter and green, a remedy for coughs, chills, bad air, and, according to him, the foolishness that comes from listening too closely to alehouse stories. The widow accepts 2 cups. The brothers share 1. The dog receives a crust from you and looks at the hunter afterward, perhaps measuring him against saints. When it's time to move, the hunter walks with you for a short distance, leading the group through a narrower track where the main road has flooded. He moves without haste, placing each foot with the confidence of someone who knows which leaves hide holes. at a rise. He stops and points toward the pale line of fields beyond the trees. There, he says. The road opens. Keep together until then. Do not cut across the marsh. Do not follow sounds in the brush. If you hear howling, listen. But do not answer. Wolves do not need conversation. This advice feels sound. You thank him. The pilgrims murmur blessings. The hunter only nods, already turning back toward his charcoal smoke, snares, and solitary watch. As you continue, the dog pauses once and looks behind. The hunter has become a dark shape among trees, then a smaller shape, then nothing at all. Ahead, the road brightens. The bells of the monastery are gone now, swallowed by distance, but their memory lingers in your ears. Around you, the pilgrims walk a little closer than before. No one speaks for several minutes. The forest begins to thin, and through the branches you see winter fields waiting under a low sky. Behind you, somewhere deep among ash and hazel, a crow calls once, harsh and lonely. It is only a crow. Everyone knows this. Everyone walks a little faster anyway. The forest releases you gradually, not with a grand opening, but with hedges returning, then ditches, then the pale backs of winter fields stretching under the low sky. You step from the last trees with the pilgrims close around you, and for a moment everyone breathes as if some narrow band around the ribs has loosened. The dog trots ahead onto the open road, shakes damp leaves from its coat, and looks back with the calm pride of an animal that has personally escorted a group of humans through their own imagination. Beyond the fields, you see smoke rising in several thin columns, and beneath it a cluster of roofs gathered around a market cross. The village is larger than the one you left, though not grand timber houses. A small stone church, a manor barn, a muddy square, and a wooden toll booth near the road, where a man in a dark hood waits with a tablet and the cheerful expression of a locked door. Market day has begun, and even from a distance you hear its low music geese complaining, wheels creaking, sellers calling, sheep bleating, pots clanging, and people explaining why their goods are better than everyone else's goods, which is one of the oldest known forms of civilization. You enter by the toll booth with the pilgrims. The older man with all the badges tries to pass as if holiness is a recognized currency, but the toll keeper disagrees. A small argument follows over whether a pilgrim carrying no trade goods should pay, whether the widow's basket counts as market burden, and whether the dog is livestock, companion, or moral witness. No one can quite agree whether tolls protect roads, enrich lords, or simply give one man a stool and a reason to annoy travellers. In the end, a few clipped coins change hands. The toll-keeper scratches marks into wax, and the dog passes free, having contributed nothing but dignity. The market square spreads before you in a churn of mud and straw. Planks have been laid in places, but many have sunk sideways, creating little traps for careless ankles. Stalls stand beneath patched canvas, their poles tied with rope and weighted by stones. A woman sells onions, leeks, and dried herbs from wicker baskets. A potter arranges brown jugs in careful rows, glaring at every child who comes too near. A fishmonger unwraps smoked eels that smell of salt, river. And a decision already regretted. Near the church wall, a baker lays out coarse loaves on a board, each one round, dark, and heavy enough to settle a legal dispute. The pilgrims drift toward food first, because devotion walks better after bread. You buy a small loaf and a cup of warm ale from a woman whose sleeves are rolled to the elbow despite the cold. She cuts the bread with a knife tied to her belt and tells you to mind the west side of the square. That is where the trappers have set up. She says they bring wolf talk with them, and wolf talk sells iron faster than honest weather sells cloaks. You follow the sound of voices and find a row of rougher stalls near the edge of the market, where the mud is darker and the men stand with their shoulders hunched against wind. There are bundles of snares, coils of rope, iron hooks, long knives in plain sheaths, and several heavy traps laid out on sacking. Their jaws are black, toothed, and ugly, made to hold whatever steps wrong. Beside them hangs a wolfskin stretched over a frame, its fur grey-brown, its head left on. Eyes replaced by shadow, the sight is not bloody, not fresh, but it hushes you all the same. A trapper in a patched indigo hood sees you looking and taps the iron with a stick. He says the trap was set beyond the North Marsh, and that the beast took 3 lambs before they caught it. Another man beside him swears it was 5 lambs, a calf, and nearly a child, though the trapper gives him a glance sharp enough to trim wool. Some swear every wolf skin at market belonged to a monstrous killer. Others say one skin may serve 10 stories if the seller has a strong voice and the listeners have weak memories. The widow in teal folds her arms. She asks how a household can afford such iron. The trapper shrugs and says fear is cheaper than sheep. This is not exactly an answer, but it is the kind of sentence men use when they want coins to come out. You watch a manor reeve bargain for 3 traps on behalf of his lord. His cloak is trimmed with worn fur, and he carries an iron keyring large enough to announce him before his mouth does. He asks whether the teeth will hold in frozen ground, whether the springs rust, whether a wolf can twist free. The trapper assures him they will hold anything short of a bear or the devil himself, though he cannot promise which category certain wolves belong to. The reeve pretends not to enjoy this line. He bargains lower anyway. Nearby, a shepherd examines a cheaper snare made of rope and bent wood. His hands are cracked from cold. He turns the thing over, uncertain. You can see the arithmetic passing through him: wool lost, lambs risked, rent owed, children needing shoes, wife needing salt, lord needing payment, winter needing everything. Fear becomes trade here, not because people are foolish, but because fear has costs, and costs must be counted. A wolf may never step near his fold, but if one does, the snare will seem cheap too late. A monk from a nearby priory stands by a smaller table, where a lay seller offers charms with the confidence of a man who has never been interrupted by theology. There are little leather pouches filled with herbs, scraps of parchment marked with crosses, bits of iron nail, red thread, and tiny carved tokens said to bear the blessing of St. Hubert. The monk's face tightens. The seller insists they are not charms in any improper sense, merely reminders of grace. The monk says grace is not usually sold 3 for a penny beside turnips. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the crowd enjoys the argument for spiritual reasons or because market entertainment is limited. You pick up one small pouch and smell rosemary, rue, and something bitter you cannot name. The seller says it should be hung above a byre door to keep wolves from troubling the animals. Then he adds, more quietly, that it also helps against fever, nightmares, envy, and sour milk. A versatile little bag, apparently, and far more ambitious than most bishops. The dog sniffs the pouch and sneezes. This weakens the seller's authority but does not ruin business. A woman buys one anyway, tying it immediately to the handle of her basket. She says her husband mocks such things but still asks where she put them when lambing season comes. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether belief lives in the head, the mouth, or the hand that ties the thread. As noon nears, the market thickens. A crier announces news from a distant town, a bounty offered for wolf heads in one shire. a dispute over grazing rights in another, a road washed out near the river crossing. Men gather to hear whether the Lord will pay for wolves taken near his forest. The question becomes tangled at once. If a wolf is killed on common land, who claims the bounty? If it is taken in the Lord's wood, who owns the beast? If a peasant sets a trap and catches the Lord's hunting dog instead, how loudly should he begin apologizing? The answers are many, confident, and mutually hostile. You stand near the market cross, eating bread softened in hot pottage from a wooden bowl, while the square moves around you in slow, muddy circles. Fear passes from mouth to mouth, stall to stall, coin to palm. It hangs in wolf skins and iron jaws. It hides in herb pouches and toll marks. It sharpens the trapper's trade, the reeve's accounts, the shepherd's worry, the monk's disapproval. The wolf itself is nowhere in sight, perhaps miles away under bare trees. Yet it has reached the market before you. By afternoon, clouds gather again. The pilgrims prepare to leave, but you linger a moment near the wolf skin, watching its fur stir in the wind. The painted wolf from the scriptorium comes back to you, then the prints in the pasture mud, then the hunter's calm voice saying hunger, not wickedness. You touch the bread in your pouch, the cracked candle no longer there because you left it at the shrine, and you glance down as the dog presses against your leg. The market bell rings from the church tower, thin and practical. People look up, then return to buying, selling, weighing, arguing and surviving, and you move on with them through the churned straw and mud, carrying the strange knowledge that in the Middle Ages even terror has a price, a stall, and someone willing to haggle over it. The market square loosens behind you slowly, as markets do, not ending so much as fraying into smaller noises. A potter wraps unsold cups in straw. The fishmonger covers his smoked eels with a cloth, though the smell continues its own business without permission. The toll-keeper sits under his little roof, counting coins with the look of a man who has discovered a small, damp kingdom and means to defend it. You pass the market cross with the pilgrims, boots pulling free of mud one step at a time, and the dog with the torn ear follows so close that its shoulder brushes your calf. At first you think it merely wants crumbs. This is reasonable. Many sacred bonds begin with bread. You've given it crusts, and in return it has offered supervision, woodland judgment, and one dignified sneeze at a charm seller. Now, as you leave the square by the east lane, the dog comes too, head low, tail level, eyes scanning the road ahead. The widow in the teal cloak notices and says it has chosen you. The older pilgrim says dogs choose whoever smells most like supper. The two brothers look at your pouch as if weighing the matter. No one can quite agree whether you've gained a guardian, a beggar, or a critic. Beyond the last stalls, the lane runs between low houses with thatched roofs dark from rain. Smoke leans from their chimneys and spreads under the clouds. Women stand at doorways shaking rushes from floor cloths, sending dust, old herbs, and the tired smell of indoor winter into the air. A boy carries a bundle of kindling nearly as large as himself. An old man sits under an eave mending a leather shoe with an awl, pulling the thread tight with slow, practiced tugs. Life narrows again after market, returning to hearth, bucket, broom, latch, and loaf. The dog pauses at one doorway where a little girl, not a child, in the tale's centre. Only a passing household shadow sets a wooden bowl of scraps near the threshold. The dog sniffs it, considers the social consequences of abandoning you, then continues onward with admirable restraint. The older pilgrim says this proves it is no ordinary dog. The widow says it proves only that the scraps were cabbage. Both explanations feel strong. At the edge of the village, you pass a low byre where cows shift in straw and breathe warm clouds through gaps in the wall. Above the door hangs a rowan branch tied with a red thread and a strip of old blue cloth. The young woman with rosemary in her pouch points to it and says her aunt hangs the same over her goat shed, though the aunt insists it is not superstition, only old household sense. Some swear rowan keeps witches from souring milk. Others say it turns aside wolves, storms, and jealous neighbours. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the branch protects the cattle or simply comforts the person who must hear them lowing in the dark. The dog lifts its nose beneath the rowan and gives the byre one long sniff. Then it sneezes again. The brothers take this as a sign of what they cannot decide. The road beyond the village is drier than the forest track but colder, laid across open fields where wind moves without asking leave. The pilgrims pull their cloaks close. You walk near the ditch, where dead reeds rattle softly, and the dog ranges between you and the hedge. Sometimes it darts forward, nose to earth. Sometimes it falls behind, listening. Its torn ear gives it a permanently sceptical look, as if every bush has made an unlikely claim. You begin to watch the watchers. The dog sees the road differently from you. Where you notice a broken fence, it notices the fox that crossed there before dawn. Where you see a patch of grass, it reads news written in scent. Where you hear wind, it hears small feet under leaves, a cart far off, the wing-beat of startled birds. To medieval people, such knowing seems close to wonder. Dogs guard folds, guide travellers, warm doorways, lick bowls, bark at strangers, and occasionally steal sausages with the moral confidence of minor nobility. They belong to the household and the edge of the wild at once. The narrow pilgrim tells a tale he heard near the coast, a dog that howled 3 nights before wolves came down from the hills, and afterward refused to enter the barn where the attack had happened. The older badge-covered pilgrim counters with a tale of a hound that barked every evening at the same empty corner until a priest found a mouse nest behind the wall. Those who tell such tales never fully agree whether dogs sense spirits, danger, weather, or merely all the small practical things humans are too proud to smell. The widow listens, then says her late husband trusted dogs more than men at fairs. Dogs, she says, steal openly, men make contract first. This feels severe, but market tolls have left everyone tender. You stop near a roadside ditch where a small plank bridge crosses toward a cluster of cottages. The pilgrims rest there, because even a slow road becomes long when your boots are wet. One brother produces a cloth-wrapped piece of cheese. The other reveals, with theatrical reluctance, a small onion. The widow cuts bread with her belt knife and shares it in pieces. You sit on a fallen log slick with moss and eat while the dog settles at your feet, not begging loudly, just existing near your food with deep spiritual concentration. You give it a corner of bread, it takes the piece gently, then looks away to chew, as if manners matter even in poverty. Across the road, a woman beats a wool blanket over a fence rail. Each strike sends pale dust into the air. She tells the pilgrims that a wolf was heard last night beyond the mill pond, though her neighbour says it was only dogs answering one another from farm to farm. Sound travels strangely across fields after rain. A bark becomes a howl becomes a pack becomes a story told beside a fire until no one remembers the first noise. No one can quite agree whether fear sharpens the ear or ruins it. The dog raises its head at the word wolf, or perhaps at the onion skin dropped by the younger brother. This causes a debate. The older pilgrim declares that dogs know certain words. The widow says dogs know tone, meat, and guilt. The narrow man says his cousin's dog once recognized the name of a dead cow. The brothers argue whether the cow had a memorable name. You sit quietly through this small legal proceeding, stroking the dog's rough neck while it gazes toward the fields with amber eyes. Its fur is coarse under your fingers, warm from life, smelling of rain, smoke, stable straw, and road dust. The afternoon lowers. Clouds thicken into a dull lid over the land. In the distance you see the square tower of another church and, beyond it, the darker shape of a gatehouse where the road enters a palisaded settlement. That will be shelter before night if you keep moving. The pilgrims gather their bundles, stiff from rest. The woman at the fence wishes you good roads and tells you not to be caught outside after the last bell. She says this as one might say not to step into a well. Sensible. Obvious. Still worth saying. You rise, the dog rises with you. There is no ceremony to it, no saintly sign in the clouds, no monk proclaiming a marvel. Just a tired road, a cold wind, and a rough-coated animal deciding that your direction is also its direction. You pass the plank bridge, the rowan-tied byre, the last bare orchard, and move toward the distant gatehouse while evening begins to gather in the ditches. Behind you, the market bell sounds faintly, then disappears into wind. Ahead, the dog trots on, ears alert, tail steady, as if it hears something you do not. Or smells supper. Evening finds you before the palisaded settlement just as rain begins again. Thin at first, then steady enough to turn the road shining black beneath your boots. The gatehouse rises ahead in the dimness, built of heavy timber on a low bank of earth, with sharpened stakes running away on either side like a row of dark teeth. It is not a castle, not quite. It is a village's hard outer thought, a place made by people who know that night has many opinions and very few of them are polite. The dog reaches the gate before you and stands beneath the dripping lintel, shaking itself so thoroughly that a nearby watchman receives half the road in droplets. The watchman, a broad man with a grey beard and a hood patched at the crown, looks down at the dog, then at you, then at the pilgrims arriving behind. His expression suggests that travellers, rain, and wet dogs are all taxes laid upon his soul by an unreasonable universe. The gate is already half closed, a lantern hangs beside it, horn panes glowing amber, and another burns above in the little watch-chamber. The grey-bearded watchman asks where you have come from, where you are bound, and whether any of you carry goods, illness, quarrels, or news that will become troublesome before morning. This seems a thorough list, though not complete. Medieval gatekeeping is mostly the art of suspecting baggage. The widow answers for the group with admirable firmness. The older pilgrim jingles faintly in support. The brothers shift their bundle and try to look innocent of salted pork. You stand under the rain with your cloak heavy on your shoulders while the watchman listens, squints toward the road behind you, and finally waves you inside. The gate closes with a deep wooden thud. The sound enters your chest in a way that is half comfort and half warning. Outside remains outside, inside, at least for the night. There are walls, fires, and people enough to hear if something goes wrong. The settlement beyond the gate is small, a lane of muddy yards, a church no larger than a sturdy barn, a few byres, a smithy gone dark, and low houses with smoke pressed flat above their roofs by the rain. But the watchman does not send you onward into the lane. The guest space is full, he says, and the rain has made the lower road impassable. Travellers may wait in the gatehouse until morning. So you climb the narrow wooden steps behind him. The room above the gate is cramped, smoky, and warmer than the road, which at once makes it beautiful. 2 watchmen sit inside with cloaks over their knees, a small brazier between them, and a board laid across barrels for a table. Rushes cover the floor in a thin, tired layer. Spears lean against the wall. A crossbow hangs from a peg, its string unspanned against damp. On the table sit a loaf of coarse bread, a crock of dripping, a knife, 2 cups of ale, and a small clay lamp that smokes whenever the door opens. The place smells of wet wool, old smoke, iron, leather, and men who have not had much fresh air but have had many opinions. You settle near the wall with the pilgrims. The dog curls beside your boots, sighing as if the entire expedition has exhausted it, though it has done most of the competent work. Rain taps on the roof, runs down the shutters, and drips through one place into a wooden bowl set carefully beneath the leak. Every few breaths, the bowl answers with a soft plink. It becomes part of the room's rhythm, along with the brazier's hiss, the watchman's low voices, and the wind pressing at the timber walls. One watchman trims the lantern wick with a small knife, pinching away the charred end and adjusting it until the flame steadies behind the hornpane. He says lanterns must be kept clean on wolf nights, not because wolves fear light, exactly, though some swear they do, but because men see better when they are not pretending the dark is empty. No one can quite agree whether a bright lantern drives away beasts, spirits, thieves, or only foolishness. The grey-bearded man says foolishness is the commonest creature at any gate. The younger watchman, whose nose is red from cold, tells you the howling was heard last night beyond the palisade, near the willow ditch. 3 calls, he says, long and low. The smith's wife heard them. The reeve heard them. A boy at the mill heard them and dropped a bucket into the stream. The older watchman snorts and says the boy drops buckets in fine weather too, so this evidence may not stand in court. A small laugh moves through the room, soft and grateful. Still, the younger man leans closer to the fire and continues. In hard winters, wolves come near the waste ground beyond the midden, where scraps are thrown and dogs nose among bones. They follow scent along ditches, they test fences, they listen for panic, or so his grandmother claimed. She used to say never to speak a wolf's name after sunset unless you wanted its ears turned toward your house. Some swear names carry farther in darkness. Others say grandmothers say such things because children are quieter when frightened by grammar. The widow crosses herself anyway. Outside, something knocks against the palisade, a loose shutter, perhaps, or a branch carried by the wind. Every person in the room pauses. The dog lifts its head, its torn ear angles toward the sound. Rain continues. The bowl catches another drop. No one speaks until the older watchman rises, takes a lantern, and opens the outer hatch just wide enough to look down over the gate. Cold air pours into the room. You smell wet wood, mud, and the sharp green scent of rain on stakes. The lantern light stretches outward in a trembling patch, touching the closed gate, the slick road beyond, the dark hedge opposite. Nothing moves there except rain. Yet the road appears changed now that you view it from behind bars and beams. A path by day become to question at night. The watchman closes the hatch and bars it. Wind, he says. Everyone accepts this, because wind is the explanation most likely to let people sit back down. Food is shared after that, partly from kindness, and partly because chewing gives the mouth something to do besides invent danger. You eat bread rubbed with dripping and drink a cup of weak ale passed along the board. The older pilgrim removes his badge-heavy hat and sets it on his knees like a holy hedgehog. One brother checks the bundle again. The other falls asleep sitting upright. which may be a gift from God or simply long practice. The widow mends a tear in her sleeve by firelight, drawing thread through wool with slow, neat movements. Medieval courage often looks like a woman repairing clothing while men discuss monsters. The younger watchman shows you a little mark carved into the beam above the door, 3 crosses and a notch shaped like a crescent. He says the old guard carved it during a winter when wolves came close enough to worry the horses. Some swear such marks confuse evil things that try to count doorways. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the carving protected the gate or merely reminded tired men to keep watch. Either way, the beam remains carved, the gate remains barred, and the lanterns remain trimmed. Late in the night, when the rain softens and the fire sinks lower, the howl comes. It is faint, far off, a single drawn thread of sound beyond the palisade, beyond the wet road, beyond the dark hedge where the lantern light cannot reach. No one moves at first. The dog stands, not barking, only listening. Another sound answers, or perhaps the wind bends the first one back upon itself. Those who tell the tale tomorrow will not fully agree. One voice or two, near or far, wolf or dog, warning or hunger. The watchman adds oil to the lantern. You sit still beneath the low roof, wrapped in damp wool, while the flame steadies again and the night presses close around the little guarded room. Morning comes without fully admitting that night has ended. The rain has passed, but the gatehouse still drips from every beam, and the wooden bowl beneath the leak holds dark water. You wake with your back against the wall, your cloak stiff at the shoulders, and the dog pressed warmly against your boots as if your feet are now part of its winter arrangements. Below, the gate remains barred until the first bell from the church strikes through the wet air, thin and dutiful. The watchmen move slowly, rubbing their eyes and stamping life into their legs. One opens the hatch and peers out at the pale road. Nothing waits there but puddles, mist, and the humble disgrace of mud. The younger watchman says he heard 2 wolves. The older says 1 wolf and 1 imagination. The widow says both are best treated with caution. No one can quite agree whether the howl belonged to hunger, weather, or a village dog with theatrical ambitions. But no one mocks the lantern that burned all night. After bread, ale, and a little cheese eaten from the board, the watchmen send you down into the settlement. Morning labour has already begun. A woman scatters ashes over the slick lane. Near the well, 2 others draw water and discuss the howl in the careful way people discuss something they wish they had not heard. The dog noses at a puddle, rejects it, and follows you toward the church. The chapel stands against the church's south side, low, damp, and crowded with the hopes of frightened people. Its door is oak, iron-hinged and swollen by weather. Inside, the air is warmer than the yard, heavy with beeswax, wet wool, old incense, and the smell of herbs drying from rafters. Rushes cover the stone floor, with rosemary and sweet flag mixed in, so each step releases a faint green scent. Along one wall, candles burn before a painted saint whose face has grown smoky from years of prayers rising too close beneath his chin. A priest in a brown wool cloak stands near a small table, sorting objects with careful hands. His shoes are muddy, his fingers chapped, and there is a thread hanging from one sleeve. On the table lie parchment scraps, cloth bags, wax seals, a bowl of salt, and a narrow box lined with faded blue silk. The older pilgrim leans toward you and whispers that the chapel has a tooth. Not a saint's tooth, a wolf's tooth. The priest hears him and sighs, with the weariness of a man who's explained the same matter to people who prefer the exciting version. The tooth, he says, was taken years ago from a wolf killed near the mill fields after a hard winter. It is kept here because folk began asking to touch it before driving flocks to the far pasture. Some swear a wolf's tooth hung over a byre door keeps other wolves away. Others say it draws them, because beasts know their own dead, even now. It is hard to tell whether the tooth guards the fold, frightens the heart into caution, or merely gives fearful hands something solid to hold. He opens the blue-lined box. The tooth is yellowed, curved, and smaller than rumour would like. It rests beside a scrap of ribbon, 2 old coins green with age, and a splinter of bone said to come from a saint's reliquary in a larger town. The saint, according to the priest, once protected shepherds, travellers, or throats, depending on which visitor is asking. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the candles before him burn steadily all the same. People come in as you stand there. A shepherd's wife brings wool from her flock to be blessed. A reeve's assistant purchases a parchment prayer for a stable door. The widow in teal touches the altar cloth and murmurs for safe roads. One brother eyes the wolf tooth as if expecting it to leap. The dog sniffs the threshold and wisely remains outside. Perhaps it respects sacred space. Or perhaps it has detected that churches rarely serve scraps. Near the back, an old woman sits with baskets of herbs and roots. She's not a witch, at least not officially, and everyone seems determined not to ask too closely. She sells rue, rosemary, mugwort, and dried betony tied with thread. Rue, she says, is bitter enough to trouble evil. Rosemary strengthens memory and courage. Mugwort helps sore feet and uneasy dreams. Betony is good for headaches, bad air, and whatever else the buyer looks worried about. Medieval remedies are wonderfully busy. One plant may be expected to assist half the body and negotiate with the soul besides. You watch a young herdsman trade a button for a thread-wrapped charm containing salt, iron filings, and crushed herb. He means to hang it from his cattle gate. The priest frowns slightly, then blesses it anyway when asked, perhaps deciding that hope travels better with supervision. The monk near the door murmurs that people should trust God, not pouches. The old woman replies that God made the herbs, the salt, the iron, and the purse to carry them. The chapel grows quiet around this argument, because both sides sound inconveniently prepared. At another table, a lay brother offers candles by weight. Beeswax cost more than tallow, but it burns cleaner and smells sweet. So those who can spare coins buy small tapers for prayers that matter most. You see how hope divides itself by purse. One household buys candles and charms, while another has only a crumb at a shrine, a bent pin, and a rowan twig tied with thread. The priest invites those gathered to bring their tokens forward. He lifts his hand over wool, herbs, parchment, and a little leather pouch shaped by many fingers. His Latin prayer moves softly through the chapel, more rhythm than meaning to most who hear it. Candle flames lean, damp cloaks steam. Outside, a cart creaks past the wall. You stand near the painted saint and feel the tenderness of the place, not certainty, not magic, but the human wish to be less alone before the dark fields. When your turn comes, you have no candle now, no token but your road-worn self and the dog waiting beyond the door. The priest sees your empty hands and blesses you anyway, touching 2 fingers lightly to the air before your brow. It feels both slight and sufficient. The widow ties one blue thread from her sleeve around a nail beside the altar, because she's carried worries too long and needs to leave one behind. You step out into the churchyard where the morning has brightened to pewter. The dog rises at once, shaking dew from its coat. Behind you, The wolf tooth lies back in its silk-lined box. The saint watches through candle smoke, and herbs dry in the rafters above, people bargaining gently with fear. The road will call again soon, but for now you remain beneath the low eaves, listening to the bell rope creak inside the tower and the small protected sounds of the village beginning another day. The chapel door closes behind you with a soft wooden sigh, and the village morning spreads outward in damp greys and small labours. Smoke lifts from low roofs. A woman near the well balances 2 buckets from a yoke across her shoulders, walking carefully over straw laid in the worst mud. The smith has opened his shutters and stands in the doorway rubbing sleep from his beard, while an apprentice stirs yesterday's coals and looks as though he would happily trade all ironwork for 1 more hour under a blanket. Somewhere a cock crows late, having apparently negotiated its own schedule with dawn. You leave the settlement after the pilgrims, the widow's blue thread still tied behind you in the chapel, the wolf-tooth shut away in silk, the dog trotting close enough to brush your knee whenever the lane narrows. The older pilgrim jingles softly under his badge-heavy hat. The brothers carry their bundle between them with more care now, perhaps because the watchman's tale has made salted pork feel like a declaration. The young woman touches the rosemary pouch at her belt as the palisade falls behind. Ahead lies the forest track. It is not the same road by which you came through the earlier wood. This one runs southward between bare fields at first, then slips under a long ridge of ash, beech, and thorn. It is a shortcut, the villagers say, though medieval shortcuts often mean only that misery arrives by a more interesting path. The lower road, washed by rain, has become a chain of flooded ruts, and the Reeves man at the gate insists this forest way is passable if taken before noon. He says carts use it in dry weather. This is not dry weather, but confidence is free when someone else must walk. At the edge of the trees stands a post with a small cross nailed to it. Beneath the cross hangs a strip of faded cloth, 3 crow feathers bound with thread, and an old horseshoe cracked through one arm. Some swear the feathers confuse night-wandering spirits. Others say they mark the place where a peddler once vanished in snow, though no one can quite agree whether he was taken by wolves, thieves, fever, or simply by the powerful medieval urge to become a different village's problem. The widow crosses herself. The dog sniffs the post and sneezes, continuing its theological reviews. You enter beneath the branches. At once, the light thins. The track is narrow, pressed between bramble and ditch, its centre raised where hooves have packed the mud and its edges soft enough to swallow a careless foot. Bare boughs lace the sky above you. Dead leaves lie slick underfoot, brown and black, smelling of earth and rain. Water drops from branches long after the rain has ended, landing on hoods, sleeves, noses, and once directly down the back of the older pilgrim's neck. His startled dignity suffers briefly but survives. Here, the world feels less governed. Behind you are gate, chapel, bell, toll-keeper, priest, herb woman, rush-strewn floors, and doors that bar from within. Ahead, you know there must be fields again, perhaps a mill, perhaps another road, perhaps a keep by nightfall. But inside the trees, those human arrangements grow faint. Law thins first, then light, then company. Not because your companions vanish, but because each person's fear becomes private. A narrow path makes even a group feel strung out, one body behind another, each listening to the brush on either side. This, you realize, is why travellers fear wolves most in places like this. Not because wolves are always present. They are not. The hunter's calm voice returns to you hunger, scent, weakness, opportunity. But the forest track gathers all the things medieval people dread into one corridor. If a wheel breaks here, there is no smith at the corner. If a horse stumbles, no neighbour hears at once. If dusk catches you, no bell tells the dark where to stop. Even the trees seem to lean inward. Not maliciously, just with the ancient indifference of things that do not pay rent, attend court, or care whether your cloak dries before evening. The narrow pilgrim begins a prayer under his breath. The brothers walk closer together. The widow keeps her basket on the side away from the ditch. You notice little signs of passage, a cart rut half filled with water, a scrap of rope snagged on thorn, hoof prints blurred by rain, and in one soft place a print that might be a large dog's, or might not. No one speaks of it. The dog notices, circles it once, then looks into the trees. You all stop. Nothing moves except a few leaves stirred by wind. Somewhere deeper in the wood, a jay screeches, sudden and harsh, and every shoulder tightens. The dog does not bark. It only stands with its torn ear lifted. The print remains in the mud, holding its small dark pool of water. Some swear that a wolf will not cross a path marked with ash from a blessed hearth. Others carry crumbs from church bread, or a nail from a chapel door, or a written charm sewn into the hem. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these things protect the traveller or steady the traveller's hands. But steadier hands hold staffs better. Steadier minds remember not to run. Perhaps that is protection enough. The widow murmurs that you should keep walking. So you do. The track climbs. Mud gives way to exposed roots, then to stones slick with moss. You pass a hollow tree where someone has tucked a little twist of straw and red thread into a crack in the bark. The young woman says such knots are sometimes left to trap fear before it follows a traveller home. The older pilgrim says if fear can be trapped with straw, he wishes someone had told him before his third marriage. The widow gives him a look. The forest, mercifully, keeps its opinion. Near the top of the rise, you pause to drink from a flask. Your bread is nearly gone. The brothers share a heel with the dog, who accepts it with the seriousness of a knight receiving land. From here, through the branches, you can see pale fields beyond the far edge of the wood. They look close, but distances in forest are tricksters. A path may promise release for an hour before granting it. Then a sound comes from the left. Not a howl, not even a growl, a crackle in brush, low and brief. The dog turns first. The pilgrims freeze. You feel your own breath pause in your throat, and for one strange moment you understand the old bestiary tale of the wolf stealing a person's voice. Perhaps no magic is needed. Fear does the work swiftly. The brush parts. A thin deer steps into view, ribs faint beneath its winter coat, ears wide, eyes dark. It stands across the ditch, looking at all of you with the deep disappointment wild creatures reserve for human interruptions. Then it bounds away between the trunks, white tail flashing once, twice, gone. Everyone exhales. The younger brother laughs under his breath, too softly to wake shame. The older pilgrim says he knew it was a deer. No one believes him, which is fair. Yet the relief does not make the fear foolish. It only shows how ready the body is to turn sound into danger when the road is narrow and the trees are close. Medieval people know this readiness well. They live by it. The shepherd counts because one missing sheep matters. The watchman trims the lantern because darkness lies. The priest blesses herbs because hope needs a shape. The hunter reads mud because not every fear is a monster, but every sign deserves respect. You descend toward the light, boots sliding, cloak catching on thorn. The dog goes first, then waits at the edge where the branches thin. Beyond the last trees, the fields open under a brighter sky, and somewhere far away a bell rings noon, faint but real. The sound reaches you like a hand from the human world. You step out of the forest track with mud on your boots, cold in your fingers, and the quiet knowledge that fear is strongest where the road forgets it is watched. The bell at noon follows you out of the trees and across the open fields, faint at first, then gone beneath the wind. After the forest track, the land feels almost generous. Pale winter stubble spreads on either side of the road. Ditches shine like dull knives. Far off, smoke lifts from hearths hidden behind hedges, and black birds drift over ploughed strips where the soil lies heavy and turned. You walk with the pilgrims in a looser line now, each person quietly relieved to have sky above instead of branches. The dog trots ahead with its torn ear high, carrying itself as though it has personally negotiated your release from the wood. The road bends toward higher ground. There, on a low rise above the fields, stands the keep. It is not one of those great storybook castles with towers enough to impress a minstrel into rhyming badly for supper. It is smaller, squarer, built of grey stone and hard necessity, with a timber palisade enclosing a yard below and a watch platform facing the road. A ditch circles the outer works, dark with rainwater. Smoke rises from within. At the gate, men move like shadows against torchlight, and beyond them you glimpse the warm colour of fire spilling from a hall door. After mud, forest. Rain, tolls, charms, and wolf prints. Even a stern little keep looks like luxury, which tells you how far your standards have fallen. The older pilgrim straightens his badge-heavy hat. The widow smooths the front of her teal cloak. The brothers check their bundle as if salted pork must be made presentable before nobility. You approach slowly, boots sticking in the last stretch of mud near the gate. A guard leans on a spear and calls down to ask your business. His helmet sits crooked, and his cloak is patched with fur at the collar. He looks tired rather than fierce, which is often more convincing. Fierce men perform. Tired men have seen things. The widow explains that you seek shelter before dark and that the lower road behind is poor. The guard looks at the pilgrims, looks at you, and looks longest at the dog. That yours, he asks. You glance down. The dog sits beside your boot, innocent in the way only experienced beggars can manage. No one can quite agree whether it belongs to you, the road, or Providence, so you answer by saying it has followed since market. The guard considers this, then says dogs are better company than many travellers, and sometimes cleaner than monks after Lent. Somewhere behind him, a man laughs. Permission is given, though the dog is warned not to trouble the Lord's hounds, the cook's hens, or the steward's temper, all three being dangerous in different ways. Inside the palisade, the yard is busy with the slow urgency of evening. A boy carries armloads of split wood toward a line of watchfires near the outer ditch. Two women cross from the kitchen with covered bowls, their wool skirts lifted clear of mud. A groom leads a horse under a lean-to, rubbing its neck with a twist of straw while the animal steams in the cold. Near the well, a servant breaks ice from the bucket chain with a mallet. The sound rings sharp, then vanishes into the general murmur of people preparing to survive another winter night. You are brought into the great hall, and warmth meets you at the threshold like a blessing with elbows. The hall is long, smoky, and alive with firelight. A central hearth burns on a raised stone bed, the flames licking around thick logs while smoke climbs toward the blackened rafters and finds its way out through a louver in the roof, more or less. Rushes cover the floor, freshly scattered over older layers, with rosemary and lavender mixed in near the high table for dignity, and perhaps to persuade noses to be generous. Beeswax candles burn in iron prickets where the Lord's household sits, while cheaper tallow lights smoke lower down. Shields hang on the walls, their paint chipped. Iron keys swing from the belt of a steward who moves through the room like a man personally responsible for order, spoons, and moral decline. You're given space near the lower benches with the pilgrims and a few other travellers, a tinker with cold reddened hands, a messenger drying his cloak, and a carter who has lost one wheel pin and speaks of it as though widowed. Wooden trenchers are set out. Bread arrives first, coarse and dark, then pottage with leeks and peas, a platter of smoked fish, onions baked in ash, and strips of salted pork that make the brothers exchange a silent, victorious look. Ale is poured into wooden cups. The dog is banished to the edge of the hearth, where it immediately becomes beloved by 3 servants and suspicious to 1 cat. At the high end of the hall, the Lord is absent, away at another manor, but his lady presides in a dark gown trimmed with squirrel fur. She speaks softly with the chaplain and steward, while a young page refills cups with exaggerated seriousness. This is not a grand feast by royal measure, but for winter it glows. There is food enough to share, fire enough to dry hems, noise enough to push the forest back into memory. Someone has brought out spiced ale, warmed with a hot iron and scented with cinnamon so faint that half the room may only be imagining it. Medieval luxury, you learn, often consists of nearly tasting something expensive. A household servant tells you that watchfires are kept outside whenever wolves are reported near the fields. Some swear beasts will not cross a ring of flame. Others say the fires are more for thieves, wanderers, and the courage of the men assigned to stand in the cold. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the fires guard against wolves, darkness, or the imagination that fills darkness too quickly. Still, through the open hall door, you can see orange points burning beyond the yard, each one tended by a guard with a cloak drawn tight and a spear within reach. After eating, you step out briefly with your cup wrapped in both hands. The air strikes cold after the hall, clean and sharp with rain-washed earth. Along the palisade, 3 watchfires burn in iron baskets and shallow pits. Men feed them from a stack of brush and split wood. Sparks rise into the dark like tiny gold insects. Beyond the ditch, the fields lie black and silver under cloud, their hedges no more than darker lines. The forest you crossed has become a low smudge on the horizon. Harmless looking now, which seems unfair. A guard shows you a row of small objects nailed above the gate, a horseshoe, a strip of wolf skin, 3 iron nails bent into a cross, and a sprig of dried rowan. He says the old captain put them there after a winter when something took hens from inside the outer yard. Some swear the wolf skin warns other wolves away. Others say it insults them. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but no one has taken it down. Removing old protections feels like inviting the world to prove you arrogant. Back inside, the hall is softened. A servant rakes the fire, the widow mends a glove. The older pilgrim tells a quiet story to the tinker, his badges glinting when he moves. The brothers eat as if famine may enter at any moment and accuse them of negligence. Near the hearth, the dog sleeps with its nose tucked under its tail, one ear still angled toward the door. You sit again on the bench, your cloak drying slowly, your hands warm around the cup. Beyond the walls, guards feed the watchfires against beasts, thieves, weather, and whatever shape fear chooses tonight. Within, candles tremble over trenches and tired faces. For a while, the world feels held between flame and stone. Deep in the night, the hall loses its feast and becomes only a long dark room with embers at its heart. The trenches have been cleared, the cups stacked, the servants gone to their pallets, and the last laughter has folded itself into sleep. You lie among travellers, household folk, and pilgrims near the lower end of the hall, wrapped in your cloak with a wool blanket pulled up to your chin. The rushes beneath you are warmer than bare stone, though they crackle whenever someone turns, releasing faint smells of lavender, old smoke, spilled ale, and the honest history of many boots. Above you, the rafters disappear into soot-black shadow. The louver in the roof lets out smoke poorly and lets in draughts generously, which seems like a design approved by someone who never had to sleep beneath it. The great fire has sunk low, red under ash. A servant has banked it carefully, covering the coals so morning may wake them again without the trouble of flint and tinder. Near the wall, a tallow candle gutters in a little iron holder, making the shields above it shift in and out of shape, as if old painted beasts are breathing in their sleep. You are almost sleeping when the dog rises. It does not bark. That is what wakes you fully. The rough-coated dog with the torn ear lifts its head from beside the hearth, body still low, eyes fixed on the hall door, its ears angle forward, one whole, one ragged. For a moment, nothing else moves. Then, beyond the walls, beyond the palisade, beyond the watchfires burning low in the dark, a howl draws itself through the night. It is far away. It is also not far enough. The sound begins thin, climbs, trembles, and fades until you cannot tell whether you still hear it or only remember hearing it. Around the hall, sleepers wake one by one. A pilgrim breathes in sharply. The widow in the teal cloak props herself on one elbow, her hair hidden beneath her night coif, eyes clear at once. One of the brothers sits up so quickly that his blanket slides off and leaves him blinking in the cold like a man born suddenly into disappointment. The older pilgrim's badges give a tiny muffled clink under his folded hat. No one speaks. Then another howl answers, or seems to. It comes lower, more broken by distance. Perhaps from the same throat, perhaps from another. No one can quite agree, even in the moment of hearing, whether it is one wolf crossing a hollow, two wolves calling across fields, or the wind pulling old fear through the ditches. The hall holds still around the question. At the high end, the ladies' chamber door opens. A maid steps out first with a candle, shielding the flame with her palm. Behind her comes the steward, already belting his robe with the furious efficiency of a man who suspects the night has misplaced something that belongs to him. He calls quietly for the door bar to be checked. Two servants rise, pulling cloaks over their linen shifts, and cross the rush-covered floor barefoot, wincing at the cold stones where the rushes have thinned. The bar is in place. Still, one servant touches it twice. In the Middle Ages, as you're learning, a thing counted once may comfort the mind, but a thing counted twice has a better chance of being believed. Outside, a guard calls from the yard. His voice comes muffled through timber and distance. Another answers from near the gate. The watchfires are stirred. You glimpse orange light through a crack when the hall door opens briefly, and with it comes a blade of cold air smelling of wet earth, ash, and the dark fields. The dog steps forward but does not cross the threshold. It stands with one paw lifted, listening as if the night is speaking in a language it almost understands. Some swear wolves can count the sleepers in a house by listening to their breath. Others say they circle only where wastebones are thrown, or where sheep are penned too near the outer fence. A kitchen woman, now awake beside the hearth, whispers that, if you turn your shoe's sole up before dawn, no wolf can follow your tracks the next day. The tinker mutters that turning shoes sole up is also a fine way to let spiders inspect them, which is exactly the sort of practical objection medieval superstition never appreciates. The chaplain appears from a side doorway with his cloak thrown over one shoulder and his tonsured head shining faintly in candlelight. He carries a small book and a look of calm that may be faith, sleepiness, or years of practice being observed by anxious people. He murmurs a prayer near the hearth, not loudly enough to perform, but clearly enough to gather the room. The widow crosses herself. The brothers do the same. The older pilgrim fumbles under his blanket for a badge and grips it in his fist. Even the steward bows his head, though one eye remains open toward the door, proving that devotion and management can share a skull. The howl does not come again for several breaths. In that waiting, fear settles not as panic but as weight. It lies over blankets, benches, folded cloaks, and sleeping children tucked in distant chambers. It gathers in the cold gaps beneath doors. It touches the bowl of ashes by the hearth, the iron keys at the steward's belt, the rowan above the gate, the wolf skin nailed outside in the wind. You remember the shepherd's pasture, the torn wool caught on blackthorn, the bestiary wolf painted in delicate brown ink. The shrine at dawn with its crumbs and ribbons, the hunter saying hunger, not wickedness. All of those moments sit together now in the dark hall, as if they have followed you here and taken places by the fire. Then the dog gives one low sound in its throat. Not quite a growl, or not quite a warning. Enough. The steward orders more wood to the hall fire and another guard to the yard. A servant brings a bundle of split logs from near the wall, and the fire wakes with a crackle as the wood catches. Sparks rise, light returns to faces. The hall becomes less like a cave and more like a household again. Someone passes a cup of ale. Someone else draws a blanket around the younger brother's shoulders. The maid with the candle sits near the hearth and warms her feet discreetly beneath her skirt. Because terror is serious, but so are cold toes. Those who tell the tale in the morning will not fully agree on the hour, the distance, or the number of wolves. The older pilgrim will say 3 voices. The tinker will say 1 and an echo. The steward will say the guards had everything well in hand before anyone woke, which is the sort of history stewards prefer. The dog, who has the best evidence, will say nothing at all. At last, the hall quiets again, though no one returns fully to sleep. People lie down slowly, turning toward the fire, pulling blankets tight. The chaplain remains seated near the embers, his book unopened on his knee. The candle near the wall burns shorter. Outside, the watchfires are fed, their light moving against the shutters. Somewhere beyond them, in fields silvered by unseen frost, wolves may be passing with empty bellies and bright eyes, or they may already be gone into the dark beyond the hedges. You lie still, listening to the breathing around you, to the fire settling, to the dog lowering itself once more beside your boots. The hall is draughty, smoky, crowded, and imperfectly safe. Tonight, that is enough. The old fear remains, tucked into every blanket, but warmth remains too, and stone, and companions, and a barred door held firm until morning. Before dawn, the keep begins to wake in pieces. First comes the small shift of a servant near the hearth, lifting ash with an iron rake and coaxing the buried coals until red returns beneath grey. Then a cough from the far bench, then the soft scrape of a stool, then the first pale line of the morning at the shutters, thin as watered milk. You lie still for a few breaths, wrapped in your cloak, listening to the hall remember itself after fear. The night's howling has left no mark on the walls, no scratch on the door, No proof beyond tired eyes and the dog still sleeping close to your boots. The bell from the chapel tower rings before sunrise, and the sound passes through the hall more gently than the howl did. It touches the rafters, the cold stones, the banked fire, the folded blankets, and the faces of people who have slept poorly but lived well enough to complain about it. The younger brother sits up with straw in his hair. The older pilgrim searches beneath his cloak for his hat and finds it under someone else's elbow. The widow in the teal cloak folds her blanket carefully, as if order itself is a prayer against the world's rough edges. No one can quite agree how near the wolves came. The steward says they were far beyond the lower fields. The tinker says sound travels oddly in frost. One guard claims he saw eyes near the ditch, though another insists those eyes belong to the cook's cat, who has never forgiven anyone for anything. The chaplain only says morning has come, which is the most useful answer anyone offers. You step outside with the others while the sky is still dim. The yard smells of smoke, wet straw, horse breath, and cold iron. Watchfires burn low along the palisade, each one reduced to coals and a few stubborn tongues of flame. A guard feeds the nearest fire with brush, blinking through sleeplessness. Above the gate, the horseshoe, bent nails, rowan sprig, and strip of wolfskin hang dark against the paling sky. Some swear such things kept the night at bay. Others might say the wood. The watch, the dogs, and the closed gate did the harder work. Even now, it is hard to tell where courage ends and custom begins. The dog rises beside you and stretches, forelegs low, back arched, mouth open in a silent yawn of heroic exhaustion. It noses the mud near the gate, then looks up the road as if already deciding that you're unlikely to choose the sensible direction without assistance. You reach down and scratch the rough fur behind its torn ear. Warm life answers beneath your hand. The pilgrims prepare to part from you here. The widow is bound toward a river ferry. The brothers hope to reach a cousin's farm before night. The older pilgrim claims he knows a road that saves half a day, which causes everyone to look at him with grave concern. The young woman tightens the cord at her rosemary pouch and smiles faintly, tired but steady. Those who tell the tale later may remember you as a traveller with a borrowed dog, or not at all. Medieval roads are full of brief companions who share bread, fear, and weather, then vanish into other villages' memories. You eat a small breakfast near the kitchen wall, coarse bread warmed by the fire, a spoon of thick pottage, and ale poured into a wooden cup cloudy from many hands. The cook tosses the dog a scrap with the strict instruction that this kindness is not to be discussed. The dog catches it badly, drops it in mud, and eats it anyway, proving that dignity has limits when breakfast is involved. Soon the gate opens. The road beyond lies silver with frost. The fields are quiet, their hedges black against the pale morning. Far away, the forest is only a darker line, and beyond it the country rolls onward through manor lands, abbey roads, market towns, mill streams, shrines, and villages where people are already waking to sweep rushes, light fires, milk cows, break ice from troughs, and count their animals before the day grows too busy for dread. You walk out beneath the gate with the dog at your side. Behind you, the keep shrinks slowly, smoke rising from its hall roof in a soft column. Ahead, the road bends along a ditch where reeds tremble with thawing frost. Your boots make quiet sounds in the mud. Your cloak is heavy, but the hem is beginning to dry. You think of the first town gate at dusk, the suspicious gatekeeper, the alehouse fire, the clump of wool on the table, the shepherd counting and counting again. You think of the monastery bells rolling over wet fields, the scriptorium wolf painted small and neat in the margin, the roadside shrine with crumbs and ribbons, the hunter's charcoal smoke, the market stalls where fear became iron, herb, charm, and price. You think of the wolf tooth in blue silk and the chapel herbs hanging from rafters. You think of the night hall, where one far howl turned sleepers into listeners. And you understand, quietly now, why medieval people were terrified of wolves. Not because wolves were always monsters, not because every shadow held one, not because every tale was true. They feared wolves because wolves lived where human certainty ended. They stood beyond the candle, beyond the bell, beyond the hedge, beyond the last locked door. They threatened sheep, and sheep meant wool, rent, milk, meat, warmth, and survival. They haunted roads where travellers walked alone. They grew larger in stories because the world was already large, dark, cold, and difficult to measure. A wolf could be an animal, a warning, a punishment, a rumour, a sermon, a memory of hunger, and the sound that made a whole household hold its breath. The dog trots ahead, then turns back to be sure you follow. Morning widens. The bell behind you rings once more, faint now, almost tender. Frost begins to loosen from the grass. Smoke rises straight from distant cottages. Somewhere, unseen. A shepherd opens a byre door and counts his flock in the first light. Somewhere, a monk trims a quill and copies old words beside a painted beast. Somewhere, a watchman sleeps at last with one hand near the lantern. You keep walking until the road lifts and the keep disappears behind a fold of land. The world grows softer with distance. The fear does not vanish. Medieval fears rarely do. They become habits, prayers, jokes, charms tied to doors, bells rung after dark, dogs fed by the fire, and stories told low before sleep. The dog comes back to your side, warm and ordinary, its torn ear brightened by dawn. You walk together beyond the wolves. And now the road slows, and the morning grows gentler still. The mud beneath your boots is no longer something to fight, only something soft and earthly, taking each step and giving it back. The pale sun lifts behind a veil of mist, touching the hedges, the wet stones, the last smoke from the keep, and the quiet backs of the fields. The bells fade until they're less a sound than a memory of sound, a roundness in the air, a promise that somewhere people are awake, tending fires and folding blankets and setting bread near the hearth. You do not need to hurry now. The dog walks easily, nose low, tail calm. The world that felt so sharp in darkness settles into smaller, kinder shapes: a gate, a path, a frost-white ditch, a crow lifting from a bare branch, a cottage roof breathing smoke into the cold. Even the thought of wolves grows distant, not gone, but placed where it belongs, beyond the hedge, beyond the trees, moving through its own hunger under the wide morning sky. You carry only the warmth left by fires, the hush of chapels, the smell of beeswax and wet wool, the memory of shared bread, and the steady comfort of footsteps beside you. The medieval night folds itself away, not with a door slammed shut, but with a blanket drawn gently over tired shoulders. The old fear rests, the road rests, the fields rest beneath their silver thaw. And you may rest too. Let the last watchfire sink into embers. Let the last bell soften into silence. Let the dog curl beside the threshold in dream-heavy sleep. Let the candles burn low in their iron holders, and let the smoke rise slowly into the dark rafters, carrying with it every worry that has followed you through the night. You are safe by the fire now. The gate is barred. The the wool blanket is warm, the world outside grows dim, quiet, and far away.